Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. This is take 3, which is really sad. I never got past like 15 seconds on either of the other 2 takes, but today we're going to review a product that has been requested quite a bit from my non-American viewers. This is a Schmincke Akademie watercolor set. This is a student grade watercolor set from the same company that brings us Schmincke Horadam watercolors, which I have a few of those and they're excellent quality. And this is a set that they have created for beginning artists, students, and we're going to take a look at that today. I have done a few paintings with these already. I feel like when I'm going to do a review, you really can't review a product just on swatches alone, because a product can look really bright and beautiful, but then when you go to paint with it, you may find that there are issues with mixing and other things like that. So let's first, I'm going to move these out of the way. We'll look at the finished paintings in a bit. I do have quite a few little doodles and sketches and whatnot to look at, but first let's look at the box itself. I don't know if these all come in the same box or not, but this box is actually very sharp, and what I did was I took a sandpaper block that you'd use to sharpen your colored pencils or your pastels, and I actually had to go around and blunt the edges, and I even still feel a little bit of a burr on this. And I have never had a metal palette like this. It was kind of funny because my friend Rich, the spin doctor, had sent me a message and had asked me if my Schmincke tin was really sharp, and at that point I said I didn't know, because I have my Schmincke, the paints I had at that point were all tubes, and I figured all the metal tins always, for different sets, always had seemed to be the same. So so I didn't know what he was talking about, but then when I got this, I was like, well, I was really careful because he'd said his was sharp, and he had a set of the Horadam. So then when I did pick this up, in fact, this one is very sharp. It does not have rolled edges on the fold-out palette, on the center part, or on the tray that holds the pans. So I would not recommend this palette for kids. If you get this for your children, I would tape the edges or blunt them down with sandpaper, and make sure you really do blunt them down, because these are still a little sharp, and I wouldn't let my kids use this. Of course, you could always take the pans out and put them in another palette, but part of what you're paying for when you buy a set of paints is a convenient palette. Now, one thing I do like about this is that this does rest on the table, but this is a much shallower tray, so that it's not like leaning all the way down. Let me show you. I don't know if I have one that I can. Oh yeah, I think I do. This one right here. This is my Sennelier palette. So when this opens up, this kind of tips down to the table. If I hold it sideways, you can see it's going to tip down to the table. It's got the nice rolled edges, so I don't really have to worry about paint rolling off except for in that little notch. And in my pull-out tray, the edges are bent up. Oh, can I pull this out? The edges are bent up so you wouldn't cut yourself on them. So a design like this is much better, and I believe you can get this set of 12 paints in this palette, or in a Schmincke palette that's like this that has rolled edges. So just be careful of that. The other thing I wanted to make mention of, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit, so this is, I think this is one of the Prima tins, and I just put some extra stuff in there. So the tin itself is much shallower than other tins. So if you look at those side by side, okay, it's black. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's black, it's in shadow, but look at that. Look at the depth of this right here, and it's got a rolled edge. It's a little heavier, feels a little more sturdy. This one, the palette does lay out flat because that's a design on the Prima ones that I really like. This is much shallower. It's about 2/3 of the height of the other one, and it's very sharp. It's probably done to make the palette less expensive, but it's a false economy if you end up slicing your finger open and you need stitches. So that would be a caution. If you're getting this for a child, before you give it to them, check it out. Make sure you don't have those sharp edges. But I'm going to review the paint, not really the tin, but I just wanted to make you aware of that because I think that's a pretty substantial issue. But the paint itself is nice and vibrant. The colors are, 9 of them are single pigment colors. I swatched them out right here. So yes, 9 of them are single pigments. We've got a yellow that's got 2 pigments. We have this this green here is 2 pigments. This is your typical PG7. And then the sepia has 3 pigments. And it's actually a fairly lovely color. I just personally don't really use it. It's not my favorite brown. It's got an English red, which you can mix with the ultramarine blue, like if you had just like you would a burnt sienna. It seems it's much more opaque than a burnt sienna, I feel, though. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I will compare it to, there's a couple things I want to compare it to. Oh, by the way, it does come with this really nice little swatch card on watercolor paper, so that's really handy to fill out. And as always, how I did my swatches, I did a wash of color, and then I did a streak of color after I dried it just to see how it glazed. They glazed fine. I do find that their impact is lessened as you glaze because I feel like they're not as translucent as some other student grade paints, so just kind of keep that in mind. So I was wondering why you couldn't get Academy in the United States, and I think it's because back early 1900s, Max Grumbacher opened up Grumbacher Paints in New Jersey, and he bought the license to first distribute Schmincke paints in the United States. That's what you'll see, Grumbacher and Schmincke closely related. And then I think in the 1920s he bought the license to manufacture Schmincke brand products in the United States. And then at some point he purchased the trade names to Academy and two other things. So there's Grumbacher Academy paints, and I'm wondering if that's why you can't get Schmincke Akademie, because there's Grumbacher Academy and they're essentially the same. So we'll compare those two. I don't have the exact same colors in both lines though, so I can't make a completely direct comparison. But I want to show you this closed. You can see there's a big gap between the lid, the palette lid, and the bottom, and the actual clips on the watercolor pan trays touch the back of that. If this tray's not in, this falls right into the center. So this design did save them some metal, but I feel like it just opens up the risk of injury. That's why they couldn't have rolled the edges anyway and still kept it a shallow tray. That would be my advice to the manufacturer, if they could amend that so people don't get hurt, especially on a student grade product which will be used by children. So that's that the palette design is probably the only issue I have. And not the paint. So this is Schmincke Horadam right here. These are the colors I happen to have. There's only two that are the same as what I have in the student grade. There is the PG7, the phthalo green, which in the first wash I would say this appears stronger, but then when you glaze it, I feel like the glaze is more luminous in the Schmincke. Another thing I noticed, if you look at the texture of all of these paints, they all have a very uniform texture. They all have, there's no, you don't, like the ultramarine doesn't appear to be granulating, which, you know, the Schmincke ultramarines do not really granulate unless, like other ultramarines. I think they're milled a little finer, but still, there's no difference in texture between the colors. You just have the colors, which could be useful for a beginner when mixing color and dealing with colors big enough thing to grasp, versus also taking into account granulation. But over here you'll see that like the cobalt blue deep, which is actually like a mixture of ultramarine and cobalt, has a beautiful granulating effect. Their ultramarine, which is a mixture of phthalo blue and ultramarine, which is odd, has an interesting granulating pattern and just a really almost sapphire intensity when you glaze on top. But you'll see that these different paints have different qualities to them. The burnt sienna, you see how beautiful and transparent that is. Even though it's a mix, it's PR 101, as is the English red here. It even has some black in it, PBK 9, but it still is much more luminous than the student grade. But that's what you can expect. The Horadams are at least twice as expensive, so that's something to consider. Mixing wise, I did some mixing. So down here I took my cool primaries, my lemon, my I think it's carmine, and my Prussian blue, and I got some beautiful primaries. You'll notice that when you mix your cool colors, you usually get more crisp colors, and when you mix your warm colors. And up here I mixed my warm primaries, which were Cad Red Hue, Ultramarine Blue, and Indian Yellow, and I got these earthier, warmer tones. And then I did a split primary mixing, and the colors mixed very well. And then I've got my neutrals, my cool neutral, which makes a nice purpley gray, my warm neutrals, which makes a nice chocolate brown. So really with those 6 colors, you have a great versatility. And as a beginner, I would say stick to those 6 colors. You're pretty much everything on this side of your palette. Stick to those. Don't worry about these. Maybe don't even unwrap these if you are a beginner, or if you're teaching a beginner. Use those, see what you can get, master these, and then add those to it as you want to. I really think that's the strong point of this set, because the primaries seem to glaze beautifully and have much more of a luminosity than these even though some of these are single pigment colors, they just don't have the luminosity that the primaries do, and the primaries do not have the luminosity that the Horadam colors do. So, you know, definitely a reliable student grade paint, but I wouldn't go searching high and low for it if it's not something that's easily attainable where you are. And if you already have a student grade line of paint, these aren't going to be anything substantially different. So I wanted to compare them to the Grumbacher Academy. I have to say, I love Grumbacher Academy. I think it's a fantastic student grade paint. And I don't have the exact same colors, but we can kind of compare the closest ones, and you can kind of get an idea. So like that, we got a Scarlet Lake. This is kind of, this cad red tone is kind of in between the Geranium Lake and the Scarlet Lake that I happen to have. Very comparable. Okay, these are both carmines. I actually like the carmine in the Grumbacher Academy better than the Schmincke Academy, but it's not that huge of a difference. That one's called Carmine Hue, and this one just says carmine, but they're both the same pigment, but that one is more intense. The yellow, I like this is golden yellow, PY3 and PY65. This is just the PY3, and it's much more vibrant. That looks a little dirty to me. Cad Yellow Deep Hue and the Indian Yellow are very similar. This one feels a little bit more warm. What's the right word? It just feels a little bit more buttery, I guess. I almost feel like the Grumbacher Academies might be a little more transparent, with the exclusion of chrome green oxide, which is my least favorite color in the entire world, if you have to know. If I say, what's your least favorite color? It's chrome oxide green. There you have it. Least favorite color. Let's see, and their ultramarine is very different. This is the ultramarine PB29 in Grumbacher Academy, and the ultramarine blue and this granulates quite a bit. I don't know if you could tell from that little swatch. I only had that little one because I had my niece Sarah grab that for me when she was in Portland, because our stores up here don't sell it, and I wanted that because I felt like I really needed a warm blue for this particular group of colors. I had to review it. And it's much, I feel like it's more cool than that one, and it's more granular. That almost feels more like a cobalt to me, but it's the same exact pigment, and they're both, that's Grumbacher Academy and this is Schmincke Academy, so I don't think that they are actually the same as each other, but they're definitely comparable and very similar. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I wish that this, like I said in the rooster painting video, which I'm not sure if I will have it up by the time this review is up or not. I'm kind of recording a bunch of things right now because I need to get some stuff done. I'm in the middle of a huge book illustration project, and I'm also just like feeling very overwhelmed with clutter at the moment, so I'm kind of a little frantic. So I'm kind of filming a bunch of things at once so I could take a few days and try to get things in order around my house. So where was I? My gosh, I completely forgot again. It'll come back to me. In the meantime, we'll look at some other student grade paints and compare these Schmincke Academy colors to them. But anyways, I had wondered if they were the same as a Grumbacher. I don't think they are, but I think they're comparable, and I think we'll see as we go through our swatches that they are. So what I did to my swatch book, I redid it. I took out colored pencil swatches or anything that wasn't watercolor, and I did keep a couple swatches just because I thought they were helpful. For the most part, it's just watercolor, and I put my student grade watercolors together and my artist grade together. So we're just going to go through the student grades here. So right off the bat, I showed you the Grumbacher Academy versus Schmincke Academy. This is the Sonnets by the company, the St. Petersburg I can't pronounce the Russian name, but they do the Yarka and the St. Petersburg, the White Knights colors. These are less light fast than the Academy, so you're gonna get better light fastness with the Schmincke Akademie. But I feel like mixing and some of the vibrancy in some of these colors are really fantastic. So for learning how to paint, either is going to be fine. These are cheaper. These are like $20 for 24 full pans versus I'm not sure. I think these range anywhere between $25 and $50 for a set of 12. It depends on where you live. It depends on what you have access to. So Aquafine, these are the Aquafine tubes. I did not care for that much, and I would definitely give these. These have a much more reliable output of color, I believe, and I felt like the Aquafine in tubes were a little bit untrustworthy, but the Aquafine in pans, which I have here, I actually enjoyed much more, and I felt like they were much more of a reliable color. These glaze better than the Aquafine, I will tell you that, and there are more single pigments in the Schmincke Akademie set anyway. Van Gogh is a fantastic student grade watercolor. I would rate these as probably the best. I would rate the Van Gogh student watercolors probably the best of the student grade ranges for light fastness and color quality and the availability of single pigment colors. We can compare. That is PV19. That is, those aren't the same. This is PR254 and this is PR255. But we do have both a yellow ochre, very similar though. I like the texture in the ultramarine. I like the tone of the ultramarine a little bit better. Prussian blue, I think that's a little bit more intense. And our yellows aren't exactly the same. So Van Gogh still, I think, are probably the highest quality student grade paints. These are the Sennelier Le Petit Aquarelle, which I love. So PY3, very similar there. Is that the same mix? They print the labels so teeny, I should have copied them bigger. Not the same mix, but a very similar tone. Yeah, I would say they're very comparable to the Sennelier Le Petit Aquarelle colors. So I do find the Senneliers do not have the samey feeling across colors though. They seem to have a lot more unique characteristics between colors, where I feel like these are very similar as far as how they're milled and how they come out. Cotman, which is our tried and true, it's my tried and true brand because it's so easy to find. These might be a little bit stronger than the Cotman, but I'll tell you what, the colors wear quicker. So if I look at this palette here, I've only used it for like a couple days, and I've got divots in all of my pans, and I didn't have that with the Schmincke Horadam watercolors that I poured myself and let dry, and I haven't had this with my Cotmans. My Cotmans wear a lot slower. But the Cotmans in the Academy both have that feeling of a little bit of a gelatinous texture as you wet them and you work with them, so it's almost like they're not like soaking right into the paper. They kind of appear to hover on top, kind of like the Kiritake Gansai Tanbei paints do. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's a different feeling. It's unlike, you know, a lot of artist quality colors where they're so strong, the pigment's so strong, it just whoosh out into the color. I almost feel like there's like a film in there, and it's probably the fillers that they put in there to bring the cost down. So, you know, they're definitely comparable, maybe a smidgen better than the Cotman. The Jane Davenport paints are like, and the Prima paints, those are all, I feel like they're maybe a little bit more opaque, but honestly for color wise, I think I prefer the Primas, just because in the Jane Davenports, I feel like they have more color in them and they wear a little bit slower, which is odd. I didn't think that would be the case with the Schminckes. But the Schmincke single pigment's not going to fade as much. So for quality wise, I believe these are higher because they're less likely to fade. You know what's in them. And they probably don't have the optical brighteners that those others may possess. Lucas is actually also a really excellent student grade. They make a great student grade product. And I think that I like their student grade better than the Academy, and these are a lot cheaper. The student grade's like $12 for 12, so you really can't beat that either. But hey, if these are what you can find in your area, they are definitely they're definitely worthwhile. You can learn how to mix color, you can learn how to paint. But if you already have a student grade set, you really don't need these because they're not going to be anything new and unusual. Sorry this review took so long. I hope you found it helpful. I want to thank Dave in Germany for sending me this set because I was unable to find it to buy in the United States. And until next time, happy crafting!